Hey guys, this is John Cook, Director of GVI, Group Violence Intervention, Support and Outreach. Tune in Thursdays at 7 p.m. Coming soon, we will have a Hope and Healing podcast with real stories, inspirations, and some raw information that is really going to be impactful in your lives. Follow us on Facebook at GVI Support and Outreach. Thank you, tune in. If you're looking for a transformative change, some thinking processes of healing, we'll see you soon. Peace. You're now tuned into Healing Podcast. And right now I have my brother, my fellow brother from Brooklyn. His name is Brother Rob. I'm not going to really go too much into his story because through this process, you're going to see exactly how we have commonalities. So, Brother Rob, welcome to Hope and Healing.
Welcome.
Much love to you, man.
Yes, sir.
Much
Yes,
love
sir.
to you, man.
It's a pleasure to be here, man. Just listening to your story
Thank you.
just bring back so many memories of the hood that
Yeah.
we escaped from.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that.
You know,
Tell me about escape. The word escape in from Brooklyn. What does it mean to you?
oh man, and we had a conversation about that before. Change. And what I found was that a lot of people are scared of change.
Mhm.
And when you don't know what's on the other side,
Mhm.
that can be complicated,
Right.
And we tend to find ourselves being comfortable in our discomfort.
Right.
For me, I went away when I was 19 years old, and I was hustling in the streets since I was 13.
Well, you say you went away. Did you go on vacation?
Yeah, I went on vacation.
Okay.
A long vacation. 13 years.
Okay.
13 years. I went away when I was 19. And during that time, it was an awakening for me.
Right.
It was awakening for me because I had all excuses as to why I was in the situation I was in.
Okay.
Growing up without my dad in my life, not knowing who he was. Had men in my life. I had my stepfather in my life who raised me as a son,
Mhm.
But then it turned to a point where he went on drugs,
Mhm.
And then I found out he wasn't my dad.
Mm.
So it was a lot of anger there, and I believe when my grandma passed, I finally met my uncle at 13. I met my uncle at a funeral, and he told me my dad was alive, but my dad was in a nursing home, a rehabilitation center, because my dad used to drink and he got robbed and was pushed out a window.
So wait, so all of these years you thought that your stepdad was your biological dad?
Yes.
So what was it like finding out that your stepdad wasn't your dad, but your biological dad was alive? And not only was alive, he was pushed out the window. How did you cope with that?
It was rough. I found out my stepdad wasn't my dad before I found out my dad was alive. So he never treated me any different.
Okay.
He never looked at me any different, never showed me anything different, but there was always a question in my mind how my life would be different if I had my own father in my life, because I watched how he treated my brother, even though he didn't treat me any differently, but I knew he wasn't my father.
You can feel that there was a difference.
You can feel there's a difference.
Well, so let me ask you a question. So Rob, when you say he went away, could you emphasize on exactly where it was at?
I went to prison.
You went to prison?
I went to prison.
Which prison?
Comstock. I went to Kawasaki. I went away. I was under 18. I was 19, so I was in the youth prisons at first. Rikers Island, not Spofford. Okay. Rikers Island.
You went straight to Rikers Island.
Straight to Rikers Island.
What was that experience like?
That was a little crazy. I spent 2 years on Rikers Island.
Wow.
2 years.
Neutral.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 years during the court time and everything. And during that time, it was a whole lot of people going to prison.
Right.
So Rikers Island was crazy.
Yeah, you went during a time where it was a really influx of Latinos and black on Latino crime and black on black violence, and So you had to endure it all.
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Would you think that, as I'm hearing you, the um, not necessarily the distance between your stepdad and that male figure, because he was there, but you always felt like you wasn't his. Where did the decisions come from? Ultimately led you to making a decision to, and I use the word making a decision to be sensitive to being incarcerated.
I think after I found out my dad was alive at 13, we went to see him, and my uncle took me, told me about my grandma was alive, and I had an auntie that was alive, and he had to go away. He had to go away on a business trip, and when he came back, he was going to take me to see my dad and my grandma. He never came back.
He never came back.
Disappeared. Never heard from him again. Went to go see my pops. He wasn't in the place no more. So it was like everybody just vanished. So for me, it was to a point where I was thinking, is it me? I'm not good enough.
Wow.
You know, so I can't remember. I don't recall exactly, but I think from that point on, everything began to spiral for me.
Downwards.
It was a lot of anger. It was a lot of discomfort in my life, you know, and then drugs and all that other stuff started happening. My step pops, who was always good to me, like I said, he wound up getting on drugs. So things that it was a safe haven for me. I heard you talk about Ebbets Field in your last podcast. My step pops, my uncle and them, they lived in Ebbets Field. So we used to go every other weekend. We used to go to my pop's house, and me and my brother, that was a whole different environment. You know, we got to go to the park. We got to go to Prospect Park and do different things. And that was a vacation time for us, out of the hood, out of the, even though Evans Field was still the hood, even though that area was still the hood, but back then it was different.
Right.
You know, it wasn't as bad as it was later on. You know, so it was a different experience for us. But when he started getting on drugs, that's when things really started spiraling. So it was like a lot of things happened around that same time, and I think that was a transition for me as far as my mindset and what I thought about myself and what I thought about other people.
How did you perceive other people?
I didn't care. I didn't care. I didn't have no relationship with other people. It was easy to cut them off and be indifferent about them. You know, I just had relationships with the people I had relationships with, and other people, it didn't matter.
You had relationships with other people that shared the same hurt you had.
What it was.
You found the commonality.
In the hood. That's what we all in that same environment. It was a point where I had a separation when I had my step pops and we was able to go different places. But then when that changed and I was stuck in that environment, and then I had that bitterness about my dad, and then that you're not good enough attitude, because I thought that was the reason why they disappeared, because they felt I wasn't worthy enough to be a part of their family.
Okay.
You know, so it was a mindset that was like, man, I'm not good enough. So I just became what I thought everybody wanted me to be.
That's powerful.
You know.
And so as you illustrate the past pain and hardships, and obviously the disconnect from people, the loss of trust in people, the acceptance from the community, but not the right community members. At what point did you find hope?
When I was away. When I went away, and I had faced 8 1/3 to 25 years. And during that time, as I said in the beginning, I made a lot of excuses as to why I was there, you know, and I still had that same mindset. I got to survive. I got to do what I need to do to survive. And I got an awakening, you know, during that time. God dealt with me, you know, because while I was away, when I was home, I was able to protect my younger brothers and sisters. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. Wow. I was the oldest of 6 kids. So some of the things that was going on in my household, the younger siblings didn't know about it because I was able to shelter them from it. Now, when I went away, there was nobody to shelter them from
protection.
They lost that protection, and there was nothing I can do about it. So while I was making that excuse as to why I was doing what I was doing, saying I was doing that to cover them, protect them, the Lord said, "Who protecting them now? How much was what you were doing really about them or about you?" And it had me do some self-reflecting, because they were going through some things I couldn't help them with. So
they were left defenseless.
They was left defenseless.
As you were left defenseless.
And he dealt with me. He was like, "Well, now it's not about you. It's about the people you say you love. Because if you really love them, you wouldn't have put yourself in a position where you could be taken away from them."
So while you were incarcerated is essentially where you found freedom. Isn't that ironic?
Yeah, that's why I found the
freedom. Finding freedom while you are incarcerated.
Found the freedom, and it's a lot of where I'm at right now is because of me going through that trial.
Explain to me where you are right now.
Well, I'm in a great place, married, beautiful wife, have my own home, cars, have a career, I'm a pastor now, able to speak into other people's lives. And I made a promise during that time when I was away, and I asked the Lord, I said, if you allow me an opportunity to be free, I said, I will do all I can to help other young men and women not have to go through what I went through, to know who they are and who you are to them.
And so, and I find that to be ironic as well, is that, and now you also are the assistant principal at a school that are teaching young folk. And can you give me a little bit of
I'm not the assistant principal. I'm an assistant pastor, the chancellor who runs the school.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you're right. You're right. So I have a great opportunity to speak into young children's lives, watching them grow and become all that God has called them to be, So I'm doing what I asked the Lord to allow me to do. And I never knew how it would happen, even being a pastor, During that time I was away, he told me to write down where I seen myself by the time I'm 65 years old. I was 23 at the time, and I was 5 years away from seeing my first boy.
Wow.
So I had no idea when, but he told me to write down where I seen myself, so I knew where I was at wasn't the end.
Wow.
But I still had to go through some trials during that process, because I had to see 3 boys before I made it home. So it was some times where I went to the board and I thought I was ready.
Right.
And this is what I tell people all the time. Sometimes when you're praying for some stuff and you're looking for stuff to happen and it doesn't happen, it doesn't have nothing to do with God or anybody else. It has to do with you.
You weren't ready.
I wasn't ready.
That's right.
And at the time I didn't realize it.
Right.
But in hindsight, as I look back over where I was at the time where I thought I was ready, had he let me get out during that time, I would have been back.
You would have been back. So here at the Hope and Healing podcast, we like to end on a note. And we like to say, if Rob could speak to his younger self, what would he say? The table is all yours.
I would say that where you're at right now is nothing compared to where you're going to be. So be ready for the journey. Be ready for the journey. The things that you think are roadblocks are stepping stones to take you to another level. That's what I would say.
And I would add to say is that Romans 8:18, for I reckon the suffering of yesterday is unworthy to compare to the glory that God has set for you.
Amen. That's right.
Thank you for your success. Thank you for your story. We appreciate you. Here at Hope and Healing, people's lives are being changed. And what you could do is continue to fight on your journey. And you can also end up successful.
Yes.
You take it one step at a time.
difference.